Santa Fe, New Mexico is one of the most unusual and enticing places in the United States of America altogether. Uh, there are many reasons for this, and I would like to start from way back with the railroad. When the railroad began coming to the West and making this part of the country accessible, a strange phenomenon happened, and that was that many artists came here and stayed. The most famous of all of them, the one that most people reflect upon, is George O'Keeffe, but she was one of at least a dozen or more significant painters, artists who found themselves in New Mexico in the early part of the 1900s. And with George O'Keeffe, it actually was an accident. She got stuck somehow and found herself here. And as happens to this day with many people, they are enchanted in the first 24 hours. That happened to her, and she stayed. And soon a colony of artists came, mostly to Taos and further out into the vast country that surrounds Santa Fe, but they stayed. And the reason for that is manyfold. The light is extraordinary and very different. The landscape is monumental, imposing, and mesmerizing. And the air has a very unique quality to it. Most people who have not been to New Mexico always conflate it with Arizona. They think desert, they think flat, they think sand, and they think those famous cacti that grow in Arizona. New Mexico has absolutely nothing to do with that, particularly northern New Mexico, which means anything a little bit north of Albuquerque up to the Colorado border, which is very different from southern New Mexico. But northern New Mexico, first of all, has altitude, high altitude. Santa Fe is actually 7,000 feet, which is 2,000 feet more than the so-called mile-high city of Denver. This is a climate which is called high altitude desert. And there's something very unique about the light at this altitude. There's something very unique about the air at this altitude, and the whole feel of nature and what surrounds us is very special and particular to this place. My first day here, which happens to be November, I can't tell you the exact day, but November of 1983, so 40 years ago, I arrived with the same ignorance of anyone who's never been here. I was expecting Arizona. And when I got here, it was a beautiful November day, clear sky, very blue, sunny, warm in the sun, but the air had a tinge of cold and fall to it. And I drove from Albuquerque. I arrived in Santa Fe, started walking around, and was dumbstruck. It hit me like a lightning bolt. I remember precisely walking around and thinking, what is this place? How can this be? How can there be any place that feels like this? This air, and the sunshine, but also the look. Santa Fe happens to be the oldest capital city in America. We have the oldest government building in America. We have the oldest church in America and the oldest house, all here because, as history would have it, the Spanish conquistadors were coming up here in the late 1500s. And the architecture has remained spectacularly intact because Santa Fe is very much like Italian hill towns, where the oldest part of the town is going to be at the top of the hill, and anything new that comes does not go to the top of the hill because they don't want it there. So it spreads out further. Santa Fe is very much like that, with the center of the town, and I call it a town because we're talking about a population of 100,000 people, more or less. This is a small town. And the center of it is pretty much intact due to also some excellent restrictions from the historical architectural committees that we've always had. And so even the look, in addition to the feel of it, is colonial. It's like a Spanish colonial village, town. I recall several European musicians and artists that have come here, also having no idea where they're going, and arriving, walking around a little bit, and coming to me and say, Marc, I don't understand this. Where am I? I feel like I'm either in some small town in Spain or Portugal or something like that, and I had no idea. This obviously was something which also was very alluring to the artists that decided to stay here. And we're talking about more or less 100 years ago, these artists, this first group that came. But this has continued for those 100 years. And what was very interestingly added to the painters and sculptors were a lot of incredibly famous and great photographers. That most famous of Ansel Adams' photos, the moonrise over Hernandez. Hernandez is a little suburb of Espanola, which is 20 minutes from Santa Fe. Elliot Porter lived here. Paul Caponegro. Many, many photographers, again, because of the light, which is extremely unusual. I'm thinking it's because of the altitude and the dryness. And there's always been a kind of welcoming freedom for artists. Of all the artists, the creative artists that come here or were from here in the first place, there's a real sense of individual space and solitude. The landscapes induce solitude. They are vast and they are intimidating to an individual human, and you feel your humanity, you feel your smallness, and you feel the power and the immenseness of the physical world around you. That's what this place is all about. We are also surrounded by Native Americans. The pueblos, of which there are 19 in New Mexico, are named such because of these conquistadors who came up looking for 7 cities of gold. And they found many more than 7 cities, but no gold. And they named them Pueblo, which means city. The Pueblo culture, the Pueblo Indian culture, is probably somewhere between 5,000 and plus years in this place right here. When we were building our house, one of the neighbors was walking around and found a pot which was intact on our property and presented it to us the day we moved in. And we had someone look at it who knows such things, and it was 1,000 years old, just on the property. This culture, this Pueblo culture, was the only Native American culture that was not nomadic. When you think of Indians in the States, we think about teepees and horses and moving from one place to another. Pueblos were sedentary. They built gigantic buildings. There are very extensive ruins about 4 hours from Santa Fe with buildings that were the largest buildings on Earth at that time. These are from the year 900 to say 1,000, and they are 5-story apartment buildings housing 1,500 people, built over a span of 100 years, planned. And to this day, you can go into rooms in these ruins, which in the middle of the desert with temperatures going up and down like crazy, stay within 5 degrees plus or minus of 55. This was an extensive culture and a very artistic culture. And the importance of that is that Santa Fe is surrounded by pueblos where artistry, craft, pottery, and more recently, painting and sculpture and poetry are a huge part of the indigenous culture. Santa Fe, if you measure the art market in terms of art sold in exchange for dollars, the number one place in the country for the art market is obviously New York. Number 2 is Chicago. And number 3 is our little 100,000 population town of Santa Fe. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of galleries in Santa Fe. It's one of the most sophisticated, elegant, worldly 100,000 population towns imaginable in this world. We have incredible restaurants. We have all of these art galleries. We have wonderful museums. And you feel like you're somehow simultaneously in a worldly metropolis and a small colonial Spanish town from the 1500s at the same time. Because of all of these particular aspects of the city, the musicians who come here are incredibly taken with all of this and very inspired. The whole atmosphere, the whole sense of Santa Fe is embracing culture. It embraces art, it embraces music, it embraces all of the qualities that we have as humans striving to express ourselves, be it on canvas or through the music that we are able to make. The Chamber Music Festival, which takes place in the summer over 6 weeks in July and August, has always been a highlight for the local community. A great portion of our audience are local, and they're thrilled every summer to see what we have in store for them and flock very religiously to our venues to hear the great concerts that we present over that period.